What up, everybody? Welcome to another coffee hour with Paul. That's me. Welcome. It is Tuesday. We're rolling through the week again. It is 8 a.m. on the East Coast. It is 5, I guess, out on the West Coast for all you up there early rollers who would join us. We appreciate you. Thanks for joining us. Sorry first this morning. Apologize. I did not roll out the intro on all those platforms. You know, the little pre-thing that lets you know that the show's coming. But y'all already know we do this every day. So who needs a pre-show? And you know what? As long as you loyal viewers come back every week, that's fine. Every day, that's fine. We don't care about it. I'm not trying to get the clicks. I don't worry about that kind of crap. I want to give you education and teach you about something. And we're going to have an interesting topic today. And again, a lot of you know out there, and especially if you're behind the scenes or on TikTok, whereas we do behind the scenes, which usually about 10 minutes or so before I go live, you see me scrambling to set up my screens, getting everything set up because I don't have it automated yet. I understand that I have the technology here with the stream decks and everything to push one button and everything would just go boom. I ain't figured that crap out. So I do it manually every day. And of course, sometimes I just think about a topic. If I don't have one presented to me through paulabernathy.com, sometimes I think about the topic as I'm coming down to the studio. Okay. And so I just like think of a topic. And sometimes topics are driven by, it's not always just code and NEC, it's whatever I feel, whatever we want to discuss. Today, today we're going to talk conductors again, but we're going to talk aluminum and copper. And I am seeing an awful lot of posts on social media. Maybe it's just my thread. You know, I made a comment about meg testing and the fallacies in meg testing and how they're not really reliable for what we in the wire and cable industry, as well as you out there, we get these readings on meggers and we accept them and we think, oh, okay, this is a bad wire. And it's not necessarily the case. And I can tell you that from personal experience. People want to pull it out when they think it's bad. It reads 20 megs and they're like, oh, that's got to come out. And ultimately, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the wire. And they go, well, why did it read low and all this stuff? And we can explain those type of things and why if they would have just reached out to the manufacturer. But no, they start pulling it out. And then they wonder why a manufacturer won't pay to put it back in or pay their labor when, of course, we're going to want that wire. We're just not going to give you thousands of dollars worth of replacement wire that you may have damaged during the install. Okay, that's my job. I can tell whether or not you did something right on the install. So here's a little tip. When our folks come out to your job site, when you want to do a replacement of wire because you think it's not right, trust me, make sure you have your bushings on. Make sure you explain how you installed it, because if there's a way for me to find that you did it incorrectly, you ain't getting squat. I'm just honest. I'm just honest because, again, 99% of the issues, because our wire is tested before it's shipped, 99% of the time it's damage that happens from transport from the distributor to the customer, or while it's sitting on the job site, the customer, they don't store it properly. They leave it out in the rain. They don't prepare the ends on it. They do something to it. And then they come at the end and want the manufacturer to fix the problem. And they're like, dude, you're the one that didn't store it right, or didn't load it right, or didn't set up your pull right, or drug it through gravel, or trust me, if I can find it, I will find it. And my mission is to make sure you don't get nothing. Okay. Customer is not always right. Just saying that. Okay. All right. Enough of that. So we're going to talk aluminum today because I'm seeing so many things on social media. And yeah, I look at social media. I just bought 2 e-bikes, by the way, off of social media. Okay. And people, it's like, okay, you bought them. I've actually bought it off TikTok, by the way. So again, be careful what you ask for, but I wanted to get these e-bikes for me and my wife, and if she can even ride it, and I'm worried about that. Y'all know the story here with that, but it doesn't matter. What I can do to try to encourage her and get her out more and do stuff, I'm going to do, especially as we go through this battle that we're going through, but with her Alzheimer's. But at the end of the day, she's not at that stage yet where she doesn't communicate. So I want to give her some of these things and enjoy some stuff. So, hey, I'm willing to do whatever I can do for her. It's my mission is take care of her. So anyway, I go on these social medias and I am shocked at still today. I'm not going to pull a Bret Hart on anybody and say, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. I'm not going to pull that. I'm just saying the shit that I see on social media really bothers me about where we're going in this trade. I believe in the trade's going to be a boom. I believe we're going to see massive. My problem is we're still propagating BS, and we got to stop. We just got to stop. Stop posting crap that you can't validate. Or living in the late 60s, early 70s, and many of you, it's before you even born. So there's this thing propagating out there about aluminum wire. And the guy's talking about how aluminum wire, even with services and feeder applications, and how it moves and it creeps and and it comes loose and causes fires. And look, I don't even care if you say you've had an experience out there of aluminum wire coming loose, because there's a high probability that it wasn't installed correctly in the first place. Okay. I can tell you right now, 99%, if not higher, the videos that I see on social media, ain't nobody got a torque screwdriver or a torque wrench in their hand. Ain't nobody got one in their hand. So in that case, it is virtually, and look, I'm just as guilty back in the day. Okay. Look, ain't nobody actually making connections properly if you're not using a torquing device of some type. You're just not. You're not. But we do it. But to turn around and say that it's the aluminum, for example, especially modern aluminum, we're going to talk about the differences in types of aluminum and the makeup and the construction and those type of things, as opposed and compare it to copper. And we're going to use an actual presentation that has been out there for years. And it wasn't developed by us at Encore Wire. It's been out there floating around in the ether for years, and it is accurate. It is very accurate. So we're going to be looking at that today. So that's a surprise for you. We're going to be looking at it, talking about aluminum versus copper building wire and the challenges that people face and the misunderstandings they have about it. Now, I can tell you right now, even my own brother, who knows me, well, obviously he knows me, he's my brother, still does not like aluminum. I get it. Encore Wire, I grew up in a culture where we were a copper company, then we just sold some aluminum. We were mainly copper. And to be honest with you, if you're a publicly traded company, copper makes you more money than aluminum makes you more money. So I get that mentality. I get it. I was always the approach, if you make both, I don't give a damn which you buy. I'm going to make money off of either one, right? So I'm just going to make more off of copper than I am off of aluminum. But at the end of the day, I don't care which one you buy. For me, it's important to understand that there's so many misconceptions about aluminum that floats around. So on today's show, we're going to try to dispel all of those things and talk about it. Antioxidation compounds. We're going to talk about it, look at the code, break it down for all of you out there. Now, I understand that there is a vast majority of you that it's just like the anti-short bushings in red heads that go in AC cable and you use them on MC cable. I understand that there's a vast majority of you hardliners out there that say, I don't give a shit what you say, Paul. I'm going to use an anti-short bushing on MC cable even though the code doesn't require it. I get it. You do you. Boo. But at the end of the day, it isn't required because of the listing of the fitting and how they have to be constructed. It makes the use of an anti-short bushing irrelevant. And don't confuse an anti-short bushing with a insulated throat of a fitting, because per 320.40, when AC cable, the anti-short has to go between the conductors and the armor. There is no guidelines for it under 330 for use of an anti-short bushing. And the UL standard 1569 makes no mention at all of an anti-short bushing, okay, or a bushing that goes between the conductors and the armor. Whereas if you look at UL4 for AC cable, it says it right in the standard that the manufacturer has to supply you with 35 of these little things for every 250-foot coil of AC cable. But I still get the people who say, I don't care what you say, Paul, I'm using the anti-short on MC. Well, go for it. Well, the manufacturer supplies them. That means they're part of the listing. No, it means the manufacturer is very generous and they're giving you some because they know that probably 95% of the people out there don't know the damn difference between MC and AC cable. Okay? They're not going to insult your intelligence by giving you a little disclaimer. They're just going to give you some and say, use it if you want to use it. Knock yourself out. This episode is not about MC cable, but I can never miss a good opportunity to throw facts out there about that kind of stuff, because I know that I got the people out there that say, I've been doing this for 58 years and I've always used an anti-short bushing on MC and I've never had an arc. Shut the f up. You're full of shit. Half the people that post stuff on social media are full of crap anyway. They say, well, I've seen this and I've seen that, or I've experienced that, like backstabbing. I've seen backstabs and they burn down more than wrapping the screw. Shut up. You've seen a couple incidents and you're like, now it's become, everything. Okay. Like I go to a restaurant and I eat something bad. Now their restaurant's bad and everything on the menu is bad. It's not it. It may be just you didn't like that meal. Okay. Backstabbing works fine. It's listed, it's evaluated. I've seen more problems through the years with an improperly wrapped screw. Okay. People don't torque it right or too tight and it strips out. There's a little thin piece of metal in there with the threading on it. And if you do it and you hear it snap or go snap, that's not your torque wrench. If you hear it snap when you do this, you've reamed it. And over time, as that conductor heats and expands and contracts, it's going to come loose. It just is what it is. You got a bigger problem with that arc than you do backstabbing or using things like Wagos and whatnot. Like, I'm totally off topic. Aluminum. We're talking aluminum. Now, real quick, let's do some shout outs real quick from those that are in the room, and then we'll get to the day's topic. I'm going to do these quickly, folks. Paul, welcome. Glad to have you here. Douglas, glad to have you here, Douglas. Welcome. Jason's in the house. MECP's in the house.
Woo, 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 woo. Big dog.
What's up, Craig? Glad to have you here. Another CMECP's in the house.
Woo, woo, woo. Big dog.
Thank you, Thomas. Glad to have you here. What's up, Adam? Glad to have you here as always in the house, throwing out the hashtag wing. Manny reminded me over TikTok. Thank you, Manny. Manny does a dueler. He's probably got 10 screens going and he's got everything going. That's what I'm talking about. He's my kind of guy. What's up? What's up, Craig? Glad to have you here. What's up, Haas? Right down here in Richmond, right down the road. And one day I'm going to be in Richmond. We got to hook up, Haas. I'll take you out for some for lunch or something like that, and we can shoot the fat here. What's up? Let's see here. I do come to Richmond every now and then. So what's up, Rob? Glad to have you here. Shout out to all the code nerds. Okay. Manny's shouting out to all the code nerds. Welcome. Glad to have you here. What's up, Skiaddle, Skididdly-doo? Welcome to the show as usual. Thank you for being here. Got another CMECP in the house. Dude, we're loading. We're packing the house when it comes to CMECPs. That's what, dude, look at here. Dude, another CMECP. So look, folks out there on the internet, Ethernet, if you say we don't have CMECPs, we got CMECPs. Not everybody can be a CMECP, and we turn down the vast majority of people who try to be a CMECP because they can't meet the grade and they can't finish in the allotted time. These gentlemen worked their way through the program, so I'm just saying, it's awesome. What's up, Justin? Glad to have you here. John, welcome. Watching over on YouTube. Glad to have you here. Absolutely, Adam, 100%. 99 times the problem isn't the wire is one of them. Absolutely. Good morning. What's up, Crypto? Glad to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Sven, welcome, Sven. Glad to have you here on the show. As always, new place. This is your new place. Glad to have you here as well. We appreciate you coming by. Red Dog, buenos dias. Don Polio, that's what they call me out on the West Coast. I'm Don Polio. What's up, Leo? Welcome. Glad to have you here. Let's see here. Do you know what is it? Do you know what is counseling aluminum wire causing insulation shrinkage? So there is an issue with some of us, and in Prismium side of production for us had more shrinkage than our Encore. It has to do with the wire and the curing rate of that insulation and shrink back. I usually tell people that the shrink back is, again, it's not going to cause a problem, but it may mean that you need to trim your conductors and get it back so you don't have as much exposed. Usually, once it's moved a certain distance, it's not going to move anymore, but there is this level of shrink back. And a lot of times the shrink back in some of the productions is due to the catalyst and due to the curing of the, and usually cross-link polyethylenes when it's going to happen. It's a curing process and that type of thing. It doesn't mean it's a bad conductor. This just means that you make a termination nice and tight, and then all of a sudden a little, a week later or whatever, you come back and you got a little bit of the aluminum showing and it kind of creeps back. Obviously, I get it in gear. You can't just go in and after you set it and torqued it and done everything, waxed it, that you actually can come and say, "Oop, let me redo this up." We recommend different things, like you can put some heat shrink over it, that type of thing, wrap some tape over it, do something like that. But at the end of the day, it's really a tough hit and miss. It's not a defect. It's just sometimes it can happen in the curing process. And also, if there's a lot of wire that's made specifically for a project and it hasn't set in a warehouse or it hasn't cured, then you will get that back. So a lot of these big jobs where a wire is being made for the job, you'll have this wire that's produced and it's almost goes onto the truck and goes out almost immediately, like special cuts. Then you can have an issue of some of that where you actually have the insulation shrink back a little bit. Yeah, it can be discouraging, but again, it's not a defect. It's just an anomaly in the industry, and it doesn't happen with every run, that type of thing. Okay. I can't give you any solution for the field except for obviously cutting it off and things like that. My encouragement is to, when you put it up in there, make sure that you push that insulation tight to the lug, not under the lug, tight to the lug. And that's about the best you can do with it. If you get a little shrink back, again, you got to remember the lug in most cases is obviously you could touch the lug. So if you have a little showing, to some people, they're like, well, that doesn't look nice. It's not going to hurt anything. Okay. But yeah, I don't have any other solution for that. What's up, Santana? Glad to have you here. Okay. There you go. Let's see here. What's up, AJ? Glad to have you here. Welcome. Larry, welcome. Glad to have you here on the morning show. What's up, Charlie? Glad to have you here. Got that little one there, I'm sure, propped up. Let's go. Adrian, welcome. Good morning. California, early out there, probably out, watching, having a cup of coffee, looking over the fields of grapes, and Monterey, enjoying the scenery, that type of thing, I'm sure. What's up, JPB? Not to be confused with PBJ. I'm just saying. All right. And I see you with the hashtag Ellis. Okay, let's talk aluminum wire today. Let's talk about some first things first. What does the National Electrical Code say? Okay, we'll do that first. What does the NEC say about aluminum wire? Okay, first things first. We talked about this the other day when it comes to conductor sizing. What's up, Peter? Glad to have you here, Juan. I see your hashtag win. Obviously, the smallest aluminum conductor you can have is 12 aluminum, okay, for building wire. You're not going to see any manufacturer make a 12 gauge or even a 10 gauge aluminum conductor, solid or stranded. You're not going to see it, okay? We're talking pure aluminum now. I'm not going to talk about this other stuff here that I don't care to ever talk about, okay? Just talking aluminum. Okay. From my personal opinion, there's only two conductive mediums in the code that I think are important. That's copper and aluminum. Okay. So that's just me. That's just me. It's my opinion. Okay. And I'm entitled to my opinion. I'm protected by the Constitution, that I have the freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff. And I'm allowed to give my own opinion. All right. For those that know, they'll know. Okay. All right. So 12 gauge aluminum. But nobody's going to make that, by the way. We don't really start making aluminum until you get to about 8 gauge and larger. Then we'll make the aluminum. All right. Now, this is interesting. Conductive material. All right. So when it's aluminum, if it's solid aluminum, okay, 8, 10, and 12, it shall be made of 8,000 series aluminum. So most of us manufacture. So that's a good place to start. So here's the misconception that people have in the industry when they go look at aluminum, whether it's service conductors, whether it's feeders, they look at this and they lump all of aluminum in one big pile because they've heard something from somebody, okay? They've heard a rumor, oh, aluminum bad, I'll do my worst caveman expression, and, is angry a CMECP? No, he is not. No, he is not. He only probably recently qualified when he became a master, right? Just recently. So if he's interested in can going through the program, he's more than happy to go through the program. He's not talking to me right now for some reason, but it's all good. It's all good. He's mad at me for some reason. I think he thinks I stole his idea for Buzz Watts when he was showing me Ready Kilowatt. And I'm like, that gives me an idea. Well, I would never copy Ready Kilowatt because that's copyright. So I created Buzz, and I think he's pissed off at me for that. Maybe. Are you angry? Are you pissed off at me for that? That's okay. I've had other people pissed off at me. Okay. That type of thing. All right. Anyway, so at the end of the day, 8000 series aluminum is vastly different than what we saw back in the late 70s or up to that point in early 80s. All right. So the aluminum that we see today, the 8000 series. Now, manufacturers create their own blend. There's public blends that are publicly available. Okay. And then there is actually proprietary blends, and that is chemically mixing and coming up with the components to create your aluminum. Now, back in the day, the aluminum alloy was called an AA aluminum alloy 1350. Still there, still used for like service drop applications. It's still used outside of a building or structure. Still can buy it. You can still get it in a URD. 1350, it's aluminum. It's aluminum as far as the code's concerned. Ampacity-wise, it's still the same ampacity, whether it's 8000 series or 1350. That didn't change. But the National Electrical Code says, you know what? It can't come into a building. In a building, it's got to be 8000 series. Okay. If you make SEU or SER aluminum, which is very prominent, then it has to be 8000 series. So that started back in the mid 80s when UL and the NEC started changing and started requiring it to be an 8000 series. Now, proprietary blends. Now, there is certain blends like us at Prismium, which also owns General Cable, which now owns Encore Wire. We make different types of blends. We make a 8176, an 8177. We now have an 8030. We have a different blends of aluminum. And again, it's just because of acquiring companies like General Cable, which had their own proprietary blend. Everybody's known for years that back in the day, General Cable, for example, was the Aluma King. They made the most aluminum. And then Encore Wire got into the game, and then others got into the game. Southwire got into the game, and they all make their own aluminum. Now, the blending, right? The blending of this aluminum. The 8000 series, it can be any of those in the 8000 spectrum. 8030, it can be 8176, 8177. What does all that mean? Well, it's the different types of components and things that go into the making of that aluminum that gives it its characteristic. For example, 8000 series aluminum, which is what the NEC requires, has a ductileness, bendability that is virtually identical to copper. It does. Here's a challenge for you. Go get you a strand of 1350 aluminum. I mean, go out and find you some SCR that drop or whatever, not SCU or SCR, but I'm talking about service drop overhead that may have some stranded aluminum with the steel supporting core. Get you one of those strands and bend it about 10 times. And you'll see that it'll generate heat and then it'll just snap. Whereas you do that with aluminum, 8000 series, it will not. That means it can be flexed and bent around corners, used. That's called ductileness, right? And that is an inherent benefit to copper, is its ability to bend without damaging the conductive component. It has that ductileness, that flexibility. Well, the 8000 series aluminum has that. That's the first thing, okay? The next thing that I hear from people is they go, well, what about the creep? What about compression? Because copper is a harder conductor, obviously. What if I compress aluminum the same as I would copper? Well, you can't. That's why the inch pounds or foot pounds, or depending on what you're torquing, that's why they're different for the two different metals. And as long as you torque aluminum properly, you're not going to crush it, which damages it, or you're going to be too loose, which when it expands and contracts, just like copper will slightly, you under load, you could have an arc because you didn't connect it right. So the next thing that people say is, okay, then why would they use 1350 aluminum anyway back in the day when it was being used? What was the problem? Well, 1350 has great tensile strength, pulling strength. That's why it's used on service drops. That's why it's used back in the day in a lot of utilities. Now, utility now has so many more advances in utility wire and different chemical makeups that it's not just the old ACSR like we're all used to, that it's just the steel core in the center and the aluminum, and that's the supporting messenger within the wire. We still make it, but that's not the driver today when it comes to utility industry. But the 1350 is still very good when it comes to tensile strength, means it won't elongate, okay? Whereas the 8000 series is not. It is softer because of that ductileness. And we need that ductileness in buildings. We don't need that ductileness used outside for service drops. We need tensile strength, okay? Pulling it from each end, that strength, that's what you need. So that's believe it or not, that is a difference in the actual way that the aluminum is made, okay? So one of the big problems or the myths out there was back in the late 60s, there was issues where people were blaming aluminum wiring in homes for fires. Look, the reality is it was not the aluminum wire, even though it was 1350. And the reason they went to that is because when they needed to find a viable alternative to copper, okay, due to the war efforts prior, and they started changing over, they said, well, what is a good alternative? Well, they're using this wire for utility. It ought to be fine to be used in a building, right? So they just used the same material. And the technology at the time, it was 1350 alloy mixture. So that's what they used. The problem wasn't really the wire, okay? You hear me? Folks, let's dispel this bullshit myth right now. The problem really wasn't the wire, because you're not going to be bending the shit out of 1350 in a building. You're not going to bend it that much, okay? You're not going to be repeatedly. The problem was the termination. At the same time that the industry was changing away from finding an alternative for copper, they also were finding an alternative for the terminations on devices and going away from things like brass terminations, which has a pretty comparable expansion and contraction rate to 1350. They went away and changed and started using things like steel terminals and things like that because it was more readily available. And the problem was that when you put a load through a conductor, it generates heat. So any conductor is going to slightly expand and contract, especially when you compress it. So here's what happened. They used a lug that expanded and contracts at a different rate than the conductor. They weren't a mutually expansion and contraction at pretty proportional rates. So what happens is one would expand and contract at a different rate than the conductor as current was cycling through it. That caused you to have gapping, and that would cause fires, arcing, melting down devices, things like that. Luckily for us, we had overcurrent protective devices. They are better today than they obviously were back then. But at the end of the day, more fuses probably back then. But at the end of the day, that's where your problems were at. It was at termination, vastly majority of that. Not so much having to do with the aluminum wire. Now, that doesn't remove the issue where people are connecting aluminum and copper and you have a dissimilar metal and you get what's called a galvanic action, and that can cause the termination to break down. Usually it's going to break down to the point it just breaks the circuit. But anyway, that type of thing. So this was learned early on, and so there was a concerted effort to change the aluminum. Folks, today's aluminum is not the same as your grandfather's aluminum when it comes to building wiring. Let's get that out the way first. Okay. Now, let's talk electrical theory for 1 second. Copper has one electron in its outer valence shell. That outer perimeter that's the furthest from the nucleus, which is made up of neutrons and protons. The electrons are free flowing throughout the different layers. And then you have the outer layer, and they're held in place due to attraction, but they move with other atoms, okay, based on whether they're positively or negatively charged, that type of thing. So you have more electrons in the atom, it's going to be negatively charged. More protons, positively charged. Okay, so in theory, what's happening is when you got a copper atom, it has one electron. So it's easy to excite it with voltage, which is pressure, to excite keep it basic, excite those electrons and get them moving very fast. That electron that's in that outer valence shell of copper is easy to move out of its orbit, right? And so when you take an electron that's balanced, and it's always trying to get into balance, it loses that electron, it becomes negatively charged. And then what happens is the atom next to it that cast off its single electron in copper is now looking to absorb or attract. Opposites attract, right? It attracts that free floating electron, in theory, and then it comes back to balance. This movement of these electrons due to that pressure, and that's what voltage is pressure. This movement of the electrons that excites them up makes it easier in copper to cast off that electron that's in the outer valence shell. So it's rapidly changing that atom from positively charged to negatively charged, positively charged, negatively charged. All of that reaction that's going on, and you have all these atoms in the matter that we're talking about with copper, and that's how you get your electric charge. Now, when it comes to aluminum, and that's very elementary. I used to have a basic theory class, but I cut it off. We stopped teaching it because you should be getting that in your school, and you don't need it for exam prep, so we stopped doing it. Now, you really don't need that deep for exam prep. Now, when it comes to aluminum, it has 3 electrons in the outer valence shell, okay? So you think about it, elementary understanding. It takes more pressure. It takes more voltage, if you will, usable voltage, to move those electrons out of that valence shell. Harder to move 3 people. If you're pushing 3 people, it's harder to move 3 people than moving 1 person. You get me? Unless it's John Cena or somebody. But you get my saying, to push it, okay? So that's why copper is a better conductor than aluminum. But between 1 electron and 3 electrons, it is so far from an insulator, which has a lot of electrons in its outer valence shell, which creates it basically an insulator. It's a better conductor, okay? It's not the best, but when it comes to our conductive properties that are used to make affordable building wiring, for example, you have copper, you have aluminum, okay? And so 1 electron in the outer valence shell of copper, 3 in aluminum. Yes, it's gonna, and that is also why I can get more current out of a copper conductor relative to the size of a aluminum conductor of the same size, okay? Because of the ability to move that current, okay, and on a load, when there's a load, right? So at the end of the day, that's why we have to increase the size of aluminum to carry the same amount of current as a copper conductor. Makes sense? It's very elementary, but you get my point. So with that said, people say, well, that's why I always go with copper. No, we compensate that for the size increase. Right? So at the end of the day, it really now boils down to a choice. If you want something that's smaller, that carries a great amount of current, you go with copper. If you want to go with aluminum because it's maybe cheaper, maybe lighter in some vertical installations or something like that, you want to go with that. It maybe cost is a driver in an installation. Again, we love copper, but cost can be a driver. Then you look at aluminum. Are they going to function the same? Yes. I don't give a damn if somebody out there says, well, I routinely see that aluminum melts down. Shut up. You are full of crap. I do this for a living. Okay. We test the wire all the time. Okay. We have a 800, almost a 900,000 square foot building just pumping out aluminum conductors every freaking day for years now. There's nothing wrong with aluminum. I don't care if you're a diehard copper fan, and I love it. We make more money on copper. So buy it all. I don't care. But at the end of the day, if you install it right, that's the difference. Okay. It's all about the installation. Believe it or not, I'm not going to be a hypocrite here. Back in the day, I didn't have to worry about that because copper is very forgiving when it comes to 14, 12, 10, things like that. But I always torqued my feeder applications. I always torqued my service applications. And most certainly, I was more forgiving with copper than I was, when it was an aluminum. I made sure I broke out the torque wrench when I'm doing it. That's just me. You do you. I don't care what you do. I'm just telling you, if you wonder why a breaker breaks down, a main breaker burns out, or a loose connection, it is probably because they over torqued it. And you know what? One look at the actual conductor, you can tell, because if you properly torque it, you'd be surprised if you do a little test in torque. So here's your test. Get your piece of 4-aught, okay, 4-aught aluminum, and torque it tight as you normally would. Get you the other end, put it in the lug, and set your values on what it's by the manufacturer, what's on the lug, what's on the equipment, and then torque it to the specs. And then look at the two. Pull them out and look at them. Your challenge for today, do it. Look at them. You'll notice that the one that's aluminum is crushed, and everybody thinks tighter is better. It is not better, because when you compress it down, it is always going to try, and people talk about creep. The more you compress something, the more it's going to want to relax out and have that pressure pushing back out on the termination. Okay. And so that's what can cause loose terminations or creep. It's not the conductor. If you torque it right, it has no desire to expand and contract the same as you would if you over compress it or crush the product. Okay. A good example of this is a sponge. You take a sponge and you squeeze it. The highest amount of pressure for a release is the moment you start to let go, because it's holding up all that pressure. Over torquing is just as bad as under torquing. All right? Okay. Enough said with that. Let's look at the lesson real quick. Let's look at some pieces of here. Okay. So here's the feel, and this is just based on some dates, and I don't have the date here. I haven't updated the date. I do have an updated one, but I haven't felt like doing it. At the time here, copper at this point was, what is that? 85 cents per pound. Aluminum is 85 cents per pound, and copper was $2.71. Now copper is probably $4 a pound or whatnot. I don't know what it is. Okay. All right. So again, vast difference in price. That can be a control driver, right? Industry change, again, local inspectors have a problem. They don't. Let's talk antioxidant, oxidation compound. Let's talk about that. So this is the one question I hear, and I'm going to put this one to bed right now. Okay. If you're new to this show and you've never been here before, I'm going to put this to bed right now. For all of you out there who use antioxidation compound. Okay. Are you ready? Now, you can keep using it, and I encourage it, because we're happy about anything that extends the life of our products. And if you're in an area where it's subject to high levels of salt near the ocean or corrosive elements, then putting these antioxidant compound on your conductors on a lug is going to keep moisture out of the termination, out of the ends. It's going to preserve it, in those high corrosive environments. That's fine. That's a choice that you get to make. We as a manufacturer are not going to push you one way or another. But let me explain. Let me show you right here. Okay. Here we go. This is 110.14, electrical connections. Okay. And it talks about dissimilar metals, being careful how you make your connections, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Conductors of dissimilar metals shall not be intermixed, yada, yada, yada. Here's where I want to look at right here. Materials. It says materials such as solder, fluxes, inhibitors, and compounds. antioxidation compound, antioxidation inhibitors. Okay. Notice this word right here. Where employed. It's not a shall be employed. It says where it is employed. So you have the ultimate choice to use it. Not the AHJ telling you they want you to do it. Screw them. They don't have that kind of authority. Well, yes, they do. They'll fail my job. Dude, I will pick a fight every day of the week with an AHJ that forces me to put antioxidant on an aluminum conductor when the panel doesn't say that it's required to have antioxidation compound. I will fight that fight every day of the week. Now, you might say, Paul, I'm not going to fight that fight. The dude wants me to put some of this Pookie on there. I'll just put a little on there. Everybody's happy, that type of thing. That's you. You do what you want to do. And if that's the only thing I got built for and install, I might look at him and go, "You got it, boss," and do it. Me, I've been known to buck the system, and I'm like, nah, piss on that. You're not going to do that. But anyway, so it says where it's employed. Now, where it is employed and when would it be employed? Well, you're going to use it based on your expert opinion. If you're in a coastal area with a lot of salt in the air and you're noticing a lot of deterioration of electrical equipment, again, it may be a good preventative measure. But I'm not going to do it in the middle of Arkansas. I'm not going to do it in the middle of Virginia. I'm not going to do it in the middle of Texas. No, I'm not going to do it unless the manufacturer tells me to do it. And the wire and cable manufacturers are not going to tell you to do it. They're not going to discourage it. If you want to do it, we're just thinking, dude, hey, I don't know what could happen. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything. It's certainly not going to be detrimental to our insulation. It's not going to be detrimental to our conductor because it's listed for the application. So use it. I don't care if you use it, but it's not a manufacturer's listing requirement. In fact, UL 67, which handles things like the panel boards and all of the terminations, the lugging and everything that gets part of that assembly, all gets evaluated. They don't even test it with this antioxidation inhibitor. They don't test it with that. Well, if they don't test with it, then it's not required. Now, if you get a piece of equipment that specifically says that, and I have found a disconnect before that states that, okay? And those little Mallard disconnects, little pull-out disconnects, actually stated in there that when aluminum conductors are used, use an antioxidation inhibitor. Okay, then you use it. Happy. Okay. Now, notice it says where employed. That's important. Not that it must be employed. It says where employed. Okay. Where employed. It says shall be suitable for the use and shall be the type that will not adversely affect the conductors, installation, or equipment. So if a manufacturer says in their product information, do not use a petroleum-based antioxidant compound, make sure you read that because that usually means they don't want it to get on the plastic or some other component. Doesn't necessarily prohibit it from getting on the lug or the conductor or the insulation. And remember, the insulation on our product is not the equipment that the manufacturer of the enclosure is talking about. So can you get antioxidation compound on our conductor insulation? Absolutely. 7 days a week, Monday through Friday, 24/7. We don't care. It's not going to hurt our insulation at all. At all. Whether it's petroleum-based, it's not. But read the instructions for the manufacturer in that application. And again, some manufacturers of equipment don't want you to use it at all. And that should also send a message to you that if they're telling you they don't want to use it on their equipment, then you don't need to use it. But if you do use it, you need to make sure you use one that's not going to be detrimental to the product. Okay? All right. But that's important, where it's employed. Now, is that old Uncle Paul, Don Juan Paul, El Pablo, telling you that you should never use antioxidation compound? That is not what Don Juan Paul is telling you. What I'm saying is that you get to make the choice when you choose to use it. It can't be detrimental to the installation. And there are areas in the country where it may be beneficial. to the installation. But here's the facts. Here's the facts. What you're really concerned about is the metal to metal, the lug to conductor, where the rubber meets the road. If you torque it properly, okay, then you're going to break that oxygen from getting to that metal to metal contact. Because if you torque it properly, and you remember that the lugs today, if they're copper only, they'll typically be copper lugs for copper only conductors, which by the way do oxidize. And then you also have aluminum, and usually the lugs are a harder aluminum than the conductor, and that is usually like a 6000 series aluminum. It's a much harder aluminum, but you're doing aluminum to aluminum, right? So it's going to expand and contract mutually, okay? Very little expansion and contraction, just like copper is going to expand and contract. They're very similar. No, this myth that aluminum is going to have this big, wide range of creeping. Stop it. Stop propagating that BS on social media. That is not how it's going to happen with aluminum today, with 8000 series today. Just torque it right. That's it. Torque it right. Don't over tighten it. Go invest in a Harbor Freight, okay? A Harbor Freight. People say, well, I don't know about those damn Harbor Freight torque screwdrivers or torque wrenches. Shut up. They come with their certificate. They all have a percentage of plus or minus that are all in the tolerances. Just get one and use it. I'm just saying. You're professionals. Do it work? I don't screw that. It doesn't feel the same in my hand, Paul. It doesn't feel the same. I love my Milwaukee. I love my Klein. All right, fanboys, get what you want. They make them too, I'm sure. Go ahead and spend $300 for one when you can get one for $50 at, hey, I don't care what you do, okay? Make them money. I don't care. I'll buy 10 of my Harbor Freight ones to your one when yours breaks down. When mine breaks down, I just go buy a damn another one. And in many cases, they come with a lifetime warranty, like an Icon. You can go back to Harbor Freight and get another one. I'm just saying. But hey, you do you. I've never been a tool fanboy. That's why I'll never get a sponsor for any of my shows based on tools, right? Because I don't give a shit. I'm not a fanboy. You know what I'm saying? But everybody has their preference. I got you. But anyway, that's your aluminum, okay? So it's different. Just don't over torque it. All right, so driving factors is cost, things like that. So do owners understand the high premium they pay for their copper conductors? Yes, they can see that in the bill. They see what their cost. Aluminum today is a viable alternative. One of the big questions I get from people all the time, and we have many of these installations out there, is that I get people now that are going, look, hospitals. I know that the code requires things like the branch circuits to patient care areas and all that out into the vicinity. A patient is all copper and it's got to be insulated equipment. I get that's copper. Branch circuits, copper, right? Let's see. Horrible freight torque wrenches work. I owned 2 when I worked in the field. Dude, stop it. I love Harbor Freight. I love going in that store. Dude, I have gotten their cheap little grinders before, and I have grinded up almost like an 8x8 of concrete, running it for 4 days in a row. Okay, 4 days in a row on a little old, $18 grinder with the grinding wheel on it. And that sucker, I overheated, and that thing still runs today. Dude, a lot of times I probably was also one of those kids back in the day when everybody wanted Nikes and my mom got me Zips. You know what I'm saying? I probably was. I remember back in the day, I was a poor kid. I remember back in the day when everybody had those shorts, called those Vans, those real fancy Vans short. I'm dating myself. The skateboarders like those Vans that are all the different colored shorts. I couldn't afford those things. You know what my mom would do? She'd go to the store and buy fabric, and she'd make me my own custom Vans. I had all kinds of colors. I looked like a drape that was hanging in somebody's living room. But dude, I had these custom Vans. Did people tease me about it? Hell yeah. They would say, look at Paul and his little homemade custom Vans. I didn't give a shit because I look good. I was sporting that shower curtain. I'm just saying, I ain't no shame in my game. You know what? Anyway, all right, so there we go. All right, so now let's look at the key drivers, right? 1960s, here's what the problem was right here, okay? Steel screw, 1350 aluminum, okay? And it had a copper alloy plate. So you have dissimilar metal application. They changed the screw to steel, right? 3 different coefficients of thermal expansion and contraction going on. Yeah, we want to blame the wire, but it was this big thing going on. And so what happened was, here is the expansion. And just looking visually, the old brass, okay, the old brass screws, notice that the expansion and contraction was very similar to aluminum. Notice it? Very similar. Notice that when they changed to the steel screws, a bigger change, okay? So this is a coefficient of thermal expansion, and you don't need me to, you can use a visual here. And you can see that aluminum rate that it would expand and contract is different than steel. Then this is where the change took place, when they changed all these lugs. If they had left them brass, then it's basically, look, it's right in the middle. Very happy with both copper and aluminum. Even the 1350 of the day, very happy. Okay? Now, go to the next, all right? So, 40 years ago, that was utility grade aluminum, and they tried to use it in building wiring. That was a problem, because at the same time, they changed the terminations. It was a perfect storm. Everybody wants to blame aluminum, and we learned that we do like the ductileness, so we did change. UL changed, NEC changed in the 80s, okay? This is over 40 years ago, 50 years ago now, okay? The aluminum today is not the same, folks. So 8000 series was introduced in 1968. Increased UL requirements in the 60s and the 70s. We started changing and seeing the use, okay? Proven track record. We can agree that any failures took place in the 60s and early 70s. They are not germane to today. So, aluminum haters out there, you hate it because you don't understand it. I'm just saying. Oh, Paul, here you go. I'm gonna imitate some of you. Well, Paul, I'm an electrician and I go in the field and I've worked my entire 40 years in the field. And you know what, Paul? I see a lot more aluminum that has come loose because I've been doing this for 40 years. The fact that you've seen a lot of aluminum in your 40 years lets you know that a lot of people use aluminum. And you know what? There's a high probability that none of those people torqued a damn thing. And they just tightened it. You know you're guilty going to it and going, that's tight enough. Oh, wait a minute. That's not tight enough because it gets loose, right? And you give it a little more. You know that little piece in there? Hey, hello, that little gap in there where you tighten it and then you come back later and you can get a little more? That's because you overcompressed it and the material is trying to spring back. That's the creep. You wouldn't have that if you torqued it properly. It's only going to compress it, and you'd be surprised. Just do me a favor. Go get you a piece. Do this today. Go get you a piece of aluminum, a 4-aught. Put it in a lug. Tighten it down like you normally would. Don't be crazy. Do it like you normally would. That's good. And then do the same thing on the proper torquing for that lug with aluminum. And then when it snaps, stop. Pull them loose. Look at them. Tighter is not always better. I'm just saying. Well, some things it can be, but again, after 40 years, everything gets loose. But at the end of the day, think about it. All right? I'm just saying. All right, so here you see the timeline, 1898, utility utilized 1350, Niagara Falls, 46, in 1946, 1350 was introduced in the building wire market. You see how they said, well, it's good here, might as well bring it in here, right? And then in 1954, it actually had a UL listing placed on it. Seems like that'd be great. 1960, it started getting used as a replacement or an alternative to copper, okay? And then we started having problems, right? late 60s, and they said, look, something's got to change, okay? Yeah, the old guys, I'm probably wasting their breath on it, but again, they don't know what the hell they're talking about anyway. They're the ones that believe all the old myths anyway, and they just believe what anybody tells them. Again, they say that old saying, you can't teach old dogs new trick. Well, there is some great, I'm one of those old dogs. There's a lot of tips I learned in the trade growing up, but I did learn early on to don't believe what everybody tells me, that don't believe everything is gospel, do my own research. And again, I challenge you. Don't believe what I say is gospel. Call me full of shit. Many people can. That's fine. Been called worse. Do your own research. You can test this very easily with the samples like I told you to test. You know you guys got some 4-aught aluminum SCU or something sitting around. Go do the test. Do it. All right. Now, at the end of the day, the 8000 series had to be brought onto the market. Again, it coincided with issues, but they figured, oh, it must be the aluminum wire. And so they've made changes. In 1970, UL's changed the standard. And then it wasn't until 1987, okay, took a while, okay, big gap in there. You know how things take time in the code. Then we had the 8000 series. Also, terminal requirements. I don't know if you can see this. Terminal requirements also changed in 1978 under UL 486B. We got some 486 folks in here, okay? And it says for allowing both AA 1350 and AA 8000 at listed aluminum terminals, okay? So again, with the introduction of aluminum, it took a while for that to change, but it started changing. This is old because now it is 310.6. So this is old. This is a 2017 when it was 310.106B. Now it is just 310.6. But this is what we were just talking about. Stranded conductors, again, notice that all of it has to be 8000 series. I saw a video on TikTok where the guy was literally bashing it, saying that expansion contractions causes all the loose connections and that insurance companies have a fit. And so let's address the insurance companies. Insurance companies can demand whatever they want. And in fact, insurance companies can reject claims on anything they want. I can't control an insurance company. But let me talk to you insurance companies out there. If you are making people replace the wiring that was compliant at the time it was installed, or you're making people when they buy a house and you won't insure them because they have aluminum service conductors or aluminum feeders to ranges or dryers or those type of things, and they're properly sized, shame on you. Okay. If I were you, I'd find a different insurance company because that's just shame on them. Okay. Now, on the lighter side of it, if that insurance company is willing to pay for it, then I'll let them pay for it. But that's the problem. See, they won't. But again, it's usually they're not educated. I have written my share of letters for customers about this and explained it to the insurance company from a manufacturer. So I write it on behalf of the manufacturer. Okay. What's up, Bill? We got another CMECP in the house.
Woo, 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 woo.
Take
Big
care,
dog.
John. And have a good day. And I have written letters explaining this, and the insurance company have accepted that and insured the property based on the aluminum. I can tell you right now, everybody always throws up the insurance thing. And they even throw it up there when they don't even have a clue. They just know what they've heard or what somebody else has said, or they spread rumors and propagate stuff that's incorrect. Nobody knows unless you contact them and ask them yourself. Stop listening to what people say on TikTok. Stop listening to YouTube videos where you watch somebody that's a so-called influencer who does a 3-minute to 5-minute to 8-minute video, and you don't know what their background is, where they're from. Hell, they might have only been an electrician for 2 years, and now they're an authority on social media. Just be careful. People spread the crap and people don't listen. Y'all already know this because y'all know that half the stuff you see on social media is either AI driven or it's bullshit anyway. You're smarter than that. All of you are smarter than that. Okay. I'm just saying, y'all know better. All right. So here's a good thing to look at. It's interesting to look at. Now, bending force. This is bending the conductor. Notice something. So now we're talking equivalence here in copper and aluminum. So when we're talking equivalence, we're talking in ampacity. So when you see the different conductor sizes, it's based on the fact that you have to go up a little larger in size to carry more current for aluminum than you do copper. But we're talking about because of at the amp rating, say you're selecting a conductor, what is the bendability? What is the ductileness? Well, look at here. In 250 aluminum versus 3/0 copper, bending force in pounds. So in order to bend it, it only takes 122 pounds to bend 250, where it takes 189 pounds of force to bend a copper. So while this conductor is a little larger, it is easier to bend at this size range, which is probably a very common size, right? For 200 amp applications, right? Easier to bend aluminum. It's more ductile, okay? Carry basically the same amount of amps, okay? Now, and you're taking care of that conductive element, means remember earlier we talked about the 3 electrons versus the 1 electron and its current carrying ability? You're taking care of that. It becomes a moot point now because you've adjusted the size. It's a done deal. Now, what about bigger stuff? Now, check this out. This one is interesting. 750 aluminum. Big Hawkin 750 versus a 500 kc mil copper. There's a vast difference of over 250 circular mils between the two, okay? Check this out. The bending force for the 750 aluminum THHN is only 724.8 pounds to bend it, okay? Versus copper, smaller size, harder metal, it takes 734.4 pounds of bending force in order to get it bent, okay, of these big sizes, okay? Now, that is THHN. Now, you'll notice with X, a little different. Now, you're saying, well, wait a minute, Paul. Over here, the same thing. Look at this aluminum. It went up, right? That is true. And the reason for that is because when you start getting in these larger sizes, in X, the insulation gets thicker. It's a size thing. That thicker insulation, X is a cross-linked polyethylene. It is tough stuff. It is a cross-linking of the polymer. So that accounts for the extra added bending force that's necessary, okay? And that's the driving factor. When it's THHN, it's not a big of a factor, okay? And THHN is a softer, more pliable insulation, okay? But I think this is an interesting factoid right here, okay? Now, think about this. 8000 series, everybody's like, oh, I don't want to use aluminum. Okay, 8000 series is easier to bend than 1350 is to bend. Here's 1350. So you can see the ductileness and what has changed through the years with the aluminum alloy. Check this out. The average bending force to bend 1350 was 85 pounds. Okay, and this is just an average over the scope of conductor span. At 8000, it was only 40 pounds. Over 50% less force necessary. That means that the aluminum is more ductile. It allows to be bent in place. The other thing to notice is this right here. Check this out. This is spring back. Okay, people talk about creep. This is so when you bend it, its ability to try to spring back. Notice this, that with the 1350, the actual spring back. Now, this is not the creep at the terminal. This is where the aluminum is bent, like pulling it through raceways, where it bends. It wants to creep back. Creeping was never the spring back was never really the problem, all right, in the installation. But you see it's 0.33 of an inch, and 8000 is 0.20. That is a 0.20. Okay, so fractionizing it out, that is almost close to a 50% reduction just on the material. Every material that you bend is going to want to try to spring back, okay? But that is a drastic reduction. That shows you that the alloys are not the same. Now, check this out. Check this out. 8000 is different than 1350 aluminum. Now, this is micro inches per inch per hour. This is under loading, okay? Micro inches, okay? Now, notice that the 8000 is 1.6. Now, these values are very small, minute of tensile creep. Now, again, remember what we're talking about. Tensile creep, not compression. Tensile creep. Now, obviously, the tensile creep in 1350 is 2.6, okay? The 8000 is 1.6. The copper is 0.76, okay? So there is a difference in tensile creep in the products. Now, compressive creep, compression. There's where people ask me all the time. They go, I get you, Paul. I'm not worried about your tensile creep. I know that they fluctuate. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Mr. Just bought an e-bike off of TikTok, and you hope that it comes in pieces that you can actually recognize, and it doesn't have Chinese instructions that I don't know how to put it together. And Paul gets killed on an e-bike, and you read that in the news. Electrical guy gets killed, like that. If I want to go out in the blaze of glory, man, I want to be struck by lightning or something. I want to say, can't you see the headlines now? Paul Abernathy, electrical guru, killed dead by lightning strike. Now that is news. Okay, that's right there. I mean, I'm just saying that's a way for me to go out. All right, look. So 8000 series is the same as copper, folks, right here. Deformation at constant loading. What does that mean? Compressive loading, cycling with current, the creep at termination when it's torqued properly. Even the 1350 is greater than 1 mil, 1,000th of an inch. The problem with it is the more you compress it, the more you damage it, that value can be grossly extended. And that's what happened with the old 1350 is that everybody just tightened the hell out of it. And the value of the compressive creep would expand based on the degradation of the termination. Well, look at here. You torque it right. 8000 and copper. Negligible 0.5 mils of creep. And that's going to be something that is ate up in the normal thermal expansion and contraction with the terminals that are used on devices today. That's the importance, folks, of torquing, because copper today is virtually identical. Okay. Now, 8000 compressive stress relaxation. What is the relaxation? Load retention. And so if I load it down, I compress it down. What is the percentage of that it holds its actual compression under a load? What's the percentage? Well, E1350, it starts to lose that. It retains about 82% of its compressive stress. Whereas aluminum 8000 and copper is virtually identical. So let's dispel this myth right now. And you don't have to believe me. Remember the little test I told you to do? You can even measure this stuff. If you have a caliper, you can measure this stuff is really something that you can test. Okay. Very similar. Now, conditions for a reliable aluminum connection. 8000 conductor, a aluminum zinc alloy, not a dissimilar metal. Okay. And what you've got is typically the lugging that says ALCU or an AL purity lug, which means that it's going to be a dual rated connection. Then those are typically of a aluminum alloy, maybe be zinc coated or zinc coated alloy on it. That is going to be something that is going to expand and contract mutually with the conductor. Okay, same elements. All right, so you're not going to have this issue of loose terminations unless you over torque it, and you can have that take place whether it's copper or aluminum, if you damage it. It is easier to damage aluminum, obviously, than copper because aluminum is a softer metal. And that's a common sense thing, right? All right. So undesirable. So 1350 with a steel screw and a copper plate. This is what you saw in the 60s, late 60s and early 70s. This is what caused the problems. Not so much this. The moment that you compress this and you saw the creep values, right? And you imagine if this is heating up under load and it's expanding and contracting, you compress this, and as this expands and contracts at a different rate, it creates a little arc in there, a little gap. Current's got to flow from point A to point B, right? And it's going across this gap. It's really close. That creates an arc. Arc creates heat over time. And that's why you have those receptacles you see online that even if you wrap the screw, they're melting down the side of the device. It's because of a poor termination. They either over torqued it, it wasn't torqued enough, or they didn't have enough surface area. They didn't follow their code and they didn't wrap their screw properly to get that surface contact. Okay. That's what I'm saying. Now, when this happens in a backstab, it typically a person is guilty of pushing it in and out, trying to pull it in, pull it out, pull it in, pull it out, that type of thing. Strip the right amount, put it in there, and leave it alone. Leave it alone. Okay. Now here's a bad example. 1350 aluminum used on a steel screw. Same situation as this, steel lug, and then they have what's called a copper alloy lugging that holds the steel screw. All this dissimilar metals going on, but also they both expand at different rates. The aluminum 1350, old stuff, not the new 8000 series. The old stuff would expand at one rate. The steel screw would expand at another rate. And then the copper that holds the assembly would expand at another rate. Not to mention the connections here was bound to have problems over the long term, right? Now, here's another thing this is testing that was done. And here you can see this is the residual load. Okay, so this is the loading that is put on it. Okay, now, initial load 30 kP tested at room temperature. Now, these are hours. Okay, and you see the multipliers here over long periods of time. Notice something. Here's what I want you to see. As it's loading up and they measured the stress and relaxation on that termination. So this is what we're talking about right here. The compression down onto the conductor, and the compression is the moving it out, or you're crushing it, if you will, and it's got that spring back. It wants to come back to full shape, but you're compressing it out on this lug. Notice it right here. This is AA8176. This just happens, I know you can't see it. Let me zoom in. This is one proprietary blend. Well, no, this is a public blend, by the way. Most all manufacturers will use this 8176 blending for aluminum alloy, okay? But you have some proprietary. But the thing is, they're all under this 8000 series umbrella, okay? Look at these temperatures over long-term exposure under long loading cycling, okay? Look at this. They're virtually mirrored. Obviously, copper is a better conductor overall because we talked about the electrons and now that type of stuff and sizing and all that type of stuff. But if you look here, it's almost identical. They actually mirror each other over long-term span exposure, okay? Hours, 10 hours squared. Okay, we're talking long hour exposure. Now, look at what happens to the 1350 alloys over time. They drop off. And it will just keep going down. Now, again, this is under test conditions and loading, which is probably not what you're going to see in the real world, but it is proof positive that 1350 is not the same as an 8000 series. It's not, okay? I'm just saying. All right. Now, here's another interesting, take all those values. Now, what we're plotting here is equivalent size conductors. All right, check this out. So this is a set screw type connector. Here's the number of loading right here, and here's the temperature rise. So loading these things up to their maximum current carrying ability over a period of cycles means loading it up, loading it, cooling it off, loading it, cooling it off, loading it, cooling it off, over and over and over and over and over again. They wanted to see what was the temperature rise in the conductor. And again, this is all relevant to its current carrying ability. Okay, so a 1-aught 19 strand aluminum versus a 2 AWG 7. Now look at the temperatures. Even here, which are way below the normal, because this is loading, still within the safe zone, but you'll notice that it stays pretty flat. Now you're saying, yeah, but this copper stayed lower. Yes, it did stay lower, but they're all within the same type of plane. And there wasn't a notice right here, there wasn't as volatile jump. Okay. Here. So, I mean, this dropped down. So, this can be an anomaly in your test. But what you have here is a pretty balanced plane. So, even after 500 cycles of maximum current through that, the temperature rise of maximizing this conductor at that termination only got to right here, and it wasn't even 70 degrees C. And that is loading at max current over 500 cycles. Okay. I'm just saying. Common lugs are 6,000 alloy. One thing to remember, maintenance. A lot of people think, well, if you use those aluminum conductors, Paul, even that 8,000 series, that you're going to have to go in every year and retorque everything because it's going to come loose and all those wires are just going to fall out of those lugs. Well, that would be the same for copper if you didn't torque it properly. That's why you see the folks that do it right will torque it and then put a wax mark across it. Okay. Or they'll put a line across it in order to see whether or not that lug has moved. Yes, that lug barrel will move, and it has a bigger chance of moving if you compress it too tight or you over torque it. Now, maintenance every year is something that people are going to require anyway. You go back and you check it, but I can promise you the same procedure would be done whether or not it's copper or aluminum. It would be irrelevant. It's the same type of procedure. There is no extra maintenance that you have to do, folks. Even if it's in your spec, even if it's in your mind, there is no additional maintenance that you have to do for aluminum terminations than you do with a copper termination. The maintenance is still the maintenance, okay? They are equally reliable if you torque it right and follow the instructions, okay? All right. And I believe that that is all I'm going to talk about when it comes to that. I've covered a lot of things. So there you go. Mike says, same problem with one property. No one wants to insure it because half the house is wired in aluminum. Again, let's make sure we quantify. Okay, let's make sure we quantify, Mike or Alex. This is where people get screwed up. If you're talking about the aluminum wiring in the walls, then there's a high probability, like old branch circuit, it's a high probability that insurance companies developed a position based on years and they don't really know that it was devices. And so some of the insurance companies are open to say, you know what? If you go to every receptacle, every switch, every outlet box, and you use a copolymer or you use some type of approved transition between copper to aluminum at the terminations, I have seen it witnessed that the insurance companies will sign off on that and they're fine. There are some that say, you know what? The house has got aluminum branch circuits. They're old school. They might just, I want it to come out and I won't insure you. And that's fine. As an electrician, I don't care because I'm going to get paid to do it either way. I can't save the world on this. And yes, old aluminum wire, if you don't change the devices, if you don't change that aluminum to copper at those terminations and use the proper transition connector that is listed for both, that are listed for that type of transition, if you don't do that, you could have problems at your terminations over time due cycling, that type of thing, you know? But it's not necessarily the wire itself in the wall, right? That thing. So, but you know what? I can't control insurance companies and they're going to do what they want to do anyway. And, you know, they're always, you got to remember, they're protecting their liability. As an electrician, if somebody comes to me and the insurance company says they won't insure something, and I'm like, okay, I'll rip the shit out and let me put a new one. That'll be this much money. Thank you, ma'am. I'm just trying to educate you on the differences. And I'm not going to change the minds of an insurance company. There are multi-billion-dollar companies that their main sole business is to insure their people and protect their liability. That's it. I get it. Okay. That type of thing. And so before somebody on this internet misquotes me, because I am constantly misquoted. If you don't hear it from me, consider the source. Because I know on TikTok or what's his name, Whack Jackerson, will misquote me. If you've got aluminum wire branch circuit wiring in a house, insurance companies may not insure you. Offer the opportunity to say, well, I will change out at all terminations and use a properly listed device to change over properly to copper to make these connections. See if that's a viable alternative. I'm telling you right now, it was less about, if I haven't convinced you yet that the problem really was more about the termination than it was the wire, but together it created a perfect storm during that time period. That is what really happened. So you can't fix one problem without solving the other problem, right? And so they did solve those problems again. And again, that is also another reason why most of us manufacturers will not make a 12 gauge or a 10 gauge solid aluminum conductor. Even though the standards would allow us to make it, the NEC would allow us to make it. And did you know what? I could actually make non-metallic sheath cable with aluminum conductors in there. Okay. Not that other product, but I could actually use aluminum conductor. But none of the manufacturers want to touch it. Okay. Because we can't control the devices that it's going to be terminated onto. So we're not going to touch it, that type of thing. All right. All right, let's do some giveaways. And if I haven't explained anything about that, or I haven't answered your questions about aluminum today, that's your fault, because I'll answer any question you put in there, right? And I've talked about antioxidation compound. I have talked about torquing. I have talked about, and you can also get torque values if you can't find them. You can find them in the back of the NEC. For those that say, where is that? Really matters is that I'm making torque, I'm making terminations properly. Okay, that type of thing. All right. Okay. All right, let's do some giveaways here. I'll get you on the drawing. Let's spin the wheel. All right, I've got my paper. And of course, I went longer than normal again today. And I truly understand that people on this TikTok, the people out there, they won't listen to what I have to say about the aluminum. What the hell do I know? I'm just the director of technical services for the world's largest manufacturer of wire and cable. And I happen to hold 9 patents on wire and cable. But what the hell do I know? You know, Paul doesn't know what he's talking about. You'd rather listen to an influencer who's maybe only been in the field for 3 or 4 years, who become tech savvy and learned how to create a website or a TikTok account or a Facebook account. You'd rather listen to those guys, or listen to somebody who maybe works for a company for 10 years and have never written a book, never been on a committee, never done anything to better the industry, but they go to Facebook and they create a following just because of the stuff that they copy from other people on Facebook, comment on images, and yet you believe what they say is gospel. Is that who you really want to listen to? I'm just saying. All right. So, new place. It looks like you're in the drawing for the Slate Coaster. Mike Holt calls me for wire questions just not too long ago. He's a great guy. You know, if he's got wire cable questions, he picks up the phone. I'm just saying, it's what I do. Right? All right. So let's do the wheel again. I'm not going to steer you wrong, but you do you, boo. Y'all do what you want to do. Don't listen to me. I'm just saying. All right, who we got here? So you're in the drawing, new place for the Slate Coasters. If you haven't seen those, they look new place. You won again. I don't know what the heck's going on. This thing is rigged. But if you have Fast Tracks Tube already, if you don't, go get it. It's free for you for a year. Just go to fasttrackstube.com, sign up for a free membership under the member plans, and then send your login information, your username. Send it to winner, WINNER, at, you said audio's gone. It's not gone for me. I'm still here. I don't know. Everybody can still hear me, right? Stick to copper, all is well. Not true, John. You are one of those old schools right there. But you know what? I sell copper. So buy all the copper you can. In fact, double the size. In fact, when you think you need 10, go bigger. If you think you need 250, go bigger. Okay. Papa needs a big bonus check at the end of the year. Copper's king, baby. I'm saying. All right. All right. Let's see here. Okay. So there you go. FT, you got that new place. Go over and sign up for a free account if you don't already have one. If you do, let me know. All right, let's do it again. Then Aguilar. Okay, Sven, what you got is you've in the drawing for a conductor length card. These are nice metal cards. They're not the cheap little that type of thing. Yeah, you had to refresh to get the audio back. Yeah, I can't control that. I'm just streaming, so it could be the internet, whatever. All right, so Sven, you're in the length for that. You're in the drawing for that conductor length card. Okay. All right, let's spin again. Yeah, sometimes you may need to refresh your screen, that type of thing. And that looks like that's over on Fast Track's tubes. They have problems sometimes, you know. We think about leaving them, but every time I think about leaving them, I'm like, really, they make life so much easier. So I stay with them. Streaming software. Okay. All right. There you go. Santana, you're getting a free in the drawing for a free 12 months of Trade Hog. So if you win that, you'll get instructions on how to get signed up for that. Let's do one more. One more, and I'll let you go because I gotta skip my lunch today. I skip lunch a lot. That's why I'm losing weight. I am losing weight. Don't be making comments about me being fat. Rob Nickman. All right, Rob, you're in the drawing for an Ohms wheel coin. And anybody that says, I've already won an Ohms wheel coin, we have multiple different types of coins. You can decide one of the other coins if you want. That's fine, but you're in the drawing for it on September 30th. You will be in the drawing. Okay, folks, do me a favor. If you're looking for an electrical exam program or you just want to learn the NEC much better and you're not a member of our program and you want to support us, there you go, fasttracksystem.com. Also should mention, we're getting some new hat clips that are coming that are going to have things engraved like an Ohms wheel. They're pretty cool. I want to try to make them unique so that you could actually use them in the field. So maybe try to put something on there like the Ohms wheel or something on there or some formula or something on there. I want to do it, but they're neat little clips, a little novelty item that'll be available over on our website soon. You can get those. They will be engraved as well. So I think they're cool. I'm going to put one on mine for whatever reason. I'm just going to do it because I'm going to do it. I didn't need e-bikes, but I'm going to do it. Okay. People say, Paul, you're fat. Get out there and pedal on a regular bike. I don't want to pedal on a regular bike. I'm fat. I'm just saying. I'm old. I'm fat. I'm lazy. I don't want to pedal. I want to pedal a little bit and I want to ride a lot. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that's just me. All right, folks, check out Fast Tracks Tube. This will be available in Fast Tracks Tube probably in about an hour. And you can watch this again if you want over on Fast Tracks Tube without the intro and without the other stuff. You can watch it there as well. All right. All right, folks, thanks for joining me today. We'll catch you on another episode of Coffee Hour. And remember, as always, you can go to paulabernathy.com, ask your questions, submit future show topics. Be more than happy to try to work those into the plan. Till next time, folks, stay safe. God bless, and we'll catch you on another Coffee Hour. Peace. One more spin. One more spin. Let's go. One more spin. Who's going to win? Hashtag win. Will it be Christopher? One more spin for those Instagram. I think you already got this, or I think you purchased it. I think you did purchase it. So we're going to spin the wheel again for you. Christopher says one more spin. And it wasn't you, Christopher. I'm sorry. Wah, wah, wah. But you got us to spin it. Okay, Francis, you're in the drawing for Trade Hog. If you haven't tried out Trade Hog, folks, go check it out. Ask it technical questions. Ask it whatever you want about an installation. Here's a trick. Take a picture of a nameplate on your panel, or take a picture of a nameplate on something and then upload it into Trade Hog. Did you know you could do that? Yeah, you can take a picture of it and upload it, and it will analyze that picture. Give it a shot. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that. Yeah, you can do that. Till next time, folks, stay safe. God bless.